Have you ever wondered why, despite going for regular checkups, following your doctor's advice, taking your medication, and doing all kinds of medical tests, your body still feels weaker, more tired, and that unsettling sense of worry keeps growing with time? I ask this because it's happening to millions of Americans over the age of 70. Each year, more than 45 million medical tests are performed on older adults. But did you know? Nearly 40% of them are flagged as unnecessary, even potentially harmful, by major medical organizations like Harvard and the American Geriatric Society. I know that's hard to believe, but let me tell you about Eleanor. She's 75 years old, neat, kind, and very proactive about her health. She doesn't smoke, eats fairly clean, and takes a morning walk every day. But at one of her routine checkups, the doctor recommended an additional imaging test, just to be sure. No major symptoms, just caution. And because she trusted the doctor, she said yes. What happened next? She had to drink a contrast dye to prepare for the scan. Within days, her kidney function worsened sharply. She ended up in the ER. And the worst part? When reviewed again, the original concern was minor, something her body would have recovered from naturally. But once the testing started, there was no turning back. Eleanor's story is not rare. Here's the real issue. After 70, the body changes drastically. It recovers more slowly. Side effects from medication hit harder, and many tests are no longer as reliable as they were when you were 40 or 50. Yet the healthcare system, built for middle-aged bodies, keeps applying the same formula to older adults. That's a dangerous gap. You can't use a young person's map to navigate old age. The sad truth? 99% of people over 70 have no idea they're taking on risk from health screenings that seem routine. You think you're protecting your health, but you might be placing a bet on a system that doesn't fully understand your body anymore. One statistic really stopped me in my tracks. A JAMA study found that to prevent one hip fracture using bone density scans, DEXA, over 1,000 women aged 75 plus without symptoms would need to be tested. In return, hundreds were misdiagnosed and put on harsh medications. Was it worth it? This isn't about rejecting medicine. I respect doctors and the work they do, but I believe older adults deserve honest, age-appropriate information, not one-size-fits-all healthcare. You don't have to distrust everything, but you do have the right to ask, do I really need this test if I don't have symptoms? Is there a safer alternative? You can pause and think about what's truly best for your body, not just chase numbers on a lab report. And I want to invite you on this journey, not to fight medicine, but to stand up for yourself. Because at this age, every small health decision can shape the quality of the years ahead. In the next part, I'll walk you through specific medical tests to reconsider after 70, not because they're always wrong, but because they may not be right for you unless you fully understand the risks and reasons behind them. Let me begin this part with a familiar image. You go for a routine checkup, and the doctor suggests a bone density test called a DEXA scan. They say it's the gold standard to detect osteoporosis. You hear words like osteoporosis, fractures, hospital stays, and naturally you feel worried. So you agree. But here's the question. Does that test actually help after age 70? We often assume that broken bones happen because bones are weak. That sounds logical. But in older adults, most fractures aren't from weak bones, they're from falls. Falls caused by poor balance, weak legs, slower reflexes, and none of those things are measured by a DEXA scan. So why are people still encouraged to get tested? Because of the numbers, because of results, because machines give something measurable. But when the number comes back low, even just slightly low, it triggers a chain reaction. The doctor prescribes medication, you start taking it, and then your body starts reacting, sometimes in ways no one warned you about. Meet Margaret, 74. She lives alone, still teaches piano, still shops for her own groceries. During a checkup, she was sent for a DEXA scan. The result? Osteopenia, which means her bone density was just a little below average, not osteoporosis, not a disease, just a bit low. Still, her doctor prescribed alendronate, a bisphosphonate drug. Within 3 months, she experienced jaw pain while eating. Then came swollen gums. A dental scan showed early signs of jawbone necrosis, a rare but serious side effect of osteoporosis medication. She stopped the drug, but the consequences didn't stop immediately. One non-disease diagnosis led to treatment that harmed more than it helped. This isn't rare. A study published in JAMA Internal Medicine showed that in women over 75 with no fracture history, DEXA scans did not reduce hip fracture risk. To prevent just one hip fracture, over 1,000 women would need to be tested. Meanwhile, hundreds are misdiagnosed, stressed, medicated, and exposed to serious side effects. If you're thinking, then what should I do to protect my bones? Here's the answer. Balance exercises, vitamin D, strength training. That's your real bone fracture insurance. The DEXA scan, it's just a tool. Like any tool, it's only useful when used the right way. Used the wrong way, it can do damage. I'm not saying you should never get tested. I'm saying ask more questions first. Ask, do I have any actual risk factors? If the result shows osteopenia, what's the treatment plan? Is there an alternative, like physical therapy? You have the right to ask. You have the right to choose a plan that fits your body, not a chart made for a 50-year-old. And most importantly, you don't need drugs to build strong bones. I once met Joe, 79, diagnosed with osteopenia, but instead of taking medication, he chose Tai Chi and daily 30-minute walks. After 1 year, not only were his bones stronger, he also slept better, felt mentally sharper, and, most important, had 0 falls. Your bones don't need prescriptions. They need intentional movement. Remember this. After 70, protecting your bones isn't about doing more tests. It's about building strength, stability, and confidence. That's what keeps you independent, unshaken, and safe from medical decisions that may do more harm than good. You lie still. A nurse gently places sticky pads across your chest. The machine prints out a graph, those jagged lines that look very scientific. That's an ECG, an electrocardiogram, one of the most common tests in modern medicine. Most of us have had one. It doesn't hurt. It only takes a few minutes. And you think, might as well check, just in case something's wrong. But if you're over 70 and have no symptoms, an ECG might not just be unnecessary, it might set off a chain of harm you never saw coming. Let's be honest about this. As we age, natural changes occur in the heart's electrical system. Maybe a slightly irregular beat. Maybe a reading that's not perfect, but still totally harmless. The problem? Doctors rarely ignore those irregularities. They worry. They order more tests. And that's how the cycle begins. Let me tell you about Mr. John, age 77, from Ohio. He was healthy, no chest pain, no shortness of breath, just a bit tired from gardening too much. His doctor said, let's just do an ECG to be safe. The result? A tiny irregularity. The next week, a stress test. Then, a heart imaging scan. Then, an angiogram, a procedure that threads a catheter into the heart through his leg. What did they find? Nothing serious. But Mr. John ended up with a hematoma in his leg, had to be hospitalized, and has struggled with walking ever since. That little bit of fatigue? Now it's a lingering side effect. All because of one test, just to be sure. A review in the British Medical Journal concluded this: routine ECGs in older adults without symptoms offer little benefit, but carry real risks. Overdiagnosis, overtreatment, even unnecessary surgery. But there's something even more dangerous, the psychology of illness. Once a doctor says your ECG doesn't look quite right, your brain shifts. You start paying attention to every heartbeat, every short breath, every skipped beat. Then comes anxiety, insomnia, fear. One viewer named Rebecca, age 68, left a comment I'll never forget. After my doctor said my ECG looked slightly off, I became convinced I was about to drop dead. Turns out I just had an electrolyte imbalance. but I lived in fear for 2 months. One squiggly line on a printout can make your heart stop beating freely. It starts beating in fear. So, when is an ECG useful? Only if you have symptoms: chest pain, trouble breathing, unexplained fatigue, palpitations, or a history of heart disease. If you don't have any of those, ask your doctor. Is there a clear reason I need this ECG? If it shows a mild abnormality, what happens next? You deserve clarity before being pulled into the medical spiral. And more importantly, there are better ways to protect your heart than machines. Instead of annual ECGs, verify, check your blood pressure regularly, walk every day, cut back on sugar, sleep well, and, don't forget, stay socially connected. Your heart needs connection more than it needs cold electrodes. Friends, we are no longer in our 40s. Our bodies don't respond like they used to. At 70 and beyond, the smartest path isn't catching everything early. It's choosing wisely what's truly necessary and letting go of what's just routine. You go in for a checkup because of some mild lower abdominal discomfort. No fever, no vomiting, still walking fine. The doctor says, just to be safe, let's do a CT scan with contrast. Sounds reasonable, right? Modern machine, clear images. And we all think the clearer the better. But behind that contrast dye is a major risk to your kidneys, especially if you're over 70. Contrast dye is injected into your body during certain CT scans to enhance image clarity. It's like switching on a spotlight inside your body. But what most people don't realize, that spotlight can burn your kidneys. Let me introduce you to Miss Helen, age 80, retired librarian in Oregon. She went to the clinic for a dull ache near her right side. No fever, no urinary pain. A young doctor, being cautious, ordered a contrast-enhanced abdominal CT scan. Result: a small lesion about 1.5 centimeter on the adrenal gland. Unclear what it was. Days later, she felt unusually fatigued, dry mouth, low urine output. Blood tests revealed her creatinine had spiked. Diagnosis: acute kidney injury, a reaction to the contrast dye. She was hospitalized and given IV fluids for 5 days. And that small lesion? A harmless cyst. No treatment needed. Miss Helen is not alone. After age 70, kidney filtration declines naturally. Many older adults don't realize they already have reduced kidney function. So when contrast dye enters, even one dose, it can trigger inflammation, acute kidney damage, or even chronic failure. A 2018 American Journal of Medicine study found people over 70 who receive contrast dye have double the risk of kidney injury compared to those under 60. The risk isn't rare. 7 to 10% of older adults with even mild underlying conditions are affected, and many never fully recover. So why use contrast so often? Because sometimes doctors, under pressure not to miss anything, choose the just-in-case path. But in medicine, caution doesn't mean going too far. Mild abdominal pain could come from gas, stress, food sensitivity. But a contrast CT might find spots that don't need fixing. Doctors even have a name for this: incidentaloma. Accidental findings that are harmless but lead to more tests, more anxiety, and sometimes unnecessary surgeries. A viewer named Daniel shared, "I got a CT for back pain. They saw a shadow on my liver. I ended up getting an MRI, then a biopsy. It was nothing, but I spent 3 weeks terrified. My 85-year-old mother couldn't sleep when she heard I was having a biopsy." Not everything seen needs to be solved. So what can you do? Before saying yes to a contrast CT, ask your doctor. Is there another option? Maybe ultrasound, MRI without contrast. If I don't do this CT, what's the worst that could happen? If the scan finds something small or unclear, what will you do next? Sometimes monitoring and listening to your body is safer than rushing into a medical chain reaction. Instead of being pulled into test after test, be the one asking, is this truly for my benefit or just to check a box? And if your doctor isn't willing to explain honestly, find another one. You don't owe it to anyone to take unnecessary risks just because it's routine. At the end of the day, you don't need to scan everything to feel safe. You need to take control of what truly matters to your body, right now. Have you ever felt just a bit tired, cold hands and feet, trouble sleeping? And after mentioning it to your doctor, they order a thyroid test called TSH. Suddenly, you're labeled as having thyroid disease. A prescription is written, levothyroxine, and just like that, you're on lifelong medication. Sound familiar? Let me introduce you to Mr. Gary, 73, living in Colorado. After retiring, he noticed he had less energy, something completely normal for his age. But the doctor ran blood tests and found a TSH of 6.5. The diagnosis? Mild hypothyroidism. The prescription? Immediate medication. No real explanation, no questions about how he actually felt, no consideration of age-related changes in metabolism or daily rhythm. 3 months later, Gary was losing hair, anxious, his heart racing, and unable to sleep. He felt worse than before the medication. He saw another doctor who told him something shocking. At your age, a TSH of 6.5 is perfectly normal. You don't need any medication. He stopped taking the pills. It took 2 months for his body to rebalance, and he never forgot the feeling of being pulled into a disease just because of a single number. What many people don't know is that after age 70, TSH levels naturally tend to rise slightly. It doesn't mean you're sick. It's just a part of thyroid aging, like graying hair, wrinkles, or lighter sleep. A large study in the New England Journal of Medicine, 2017, found, for people over 65 with mildly elevated TSH and no clear symptoms, thyroid medication does not improve energy, memory, or weight, but it does increase the risk of irregular heartbeat. Worse, taking levothyroxine unnecessarily can rev up the body, like forcing an old car to run at race car speed. The side effects? Irregular heartbeat, bone loss, insomnia, and the feeling that your body is breaking down from the inside. A viewer named Linda from Washington once commented, "I started thyroid meds at 70 because my doctor said my TSH was 5.9. A year later, I felt like I was living in fear. I didn't dare stop the meds, but the more I took them, the more my heart felt like it was jumping out of my chest." You might see yourself in that story. Many people have been labeled as sick because of a misunderstood number. A high TSH doesn't mean you need medication. You only need treatment if you're truly experiencing symptoms that interfere with life, such as severely dry skin, chronic constipation, deep depression, extreme fatigue, or unexplained weight gain despite eating normally. If you're not experiencing those, pause. So what can you do instead of rushing into medication? First, ask for additional testing, free T4 and total T3. Don't let the doctor rely on TSH alone. One number doesn't tell the full story. Second, ask questions like, can I wait a few months and monitor this before starting medication? Is there a natural way to support my thyroid if it's really needed? And most importantly, don't let one blood test steal your sense of well-being. You might feel fine and actually be fine, but get turned into a patient just because of a system that treats numbers, not people. Remember, the goal of healthcare isn't to push every lab result to match those of a 30-year-old. It's to help you live comfortably, safely, and meaningfully after 70. You have the right to ask questions, to express doubt, and to say, I want to understand more before I decide. Because real health isn't in the numbers. It's in feeling energized, purposeful, and free. Colonoscopy. Sounds familiar, right? It's the screening test we're all told to get after 50 to catch colon cancer early. And that advice makes sense when you're 50, 55, even 65. But very few people know when to stop. We grew up believing colonoscopies are the gold standard for detecting cancer. That's true if you're younger and have risk factors. But if you've already had multiple clean results, no polyps, no family history, and you're now 76 and healthy, doing another colonoscopy might not be a good idea. Let me tell you about Evelyn, age 78, living alone in Pennsylvania. She's sharp, independent, and a great baker. Never missed her annual checkups. Her doctor said, "Just to be safe, let's do another colonoscopy." Her last one, at age 70, was completely clean. She agreed. The colonoscopy went smoothly, until a few days later. She began to feel a dull pain in her abdomen. At the hospital, doctors found a microperforation in her colon, a rare complication, but one that can be deadly if not treated quickly. She was hospitalized for 5 days, given strong IV antibiotics, and took nearly 2 months to fully recover. "I didn't know," she said. "No one told me a colonoscopy at this age could be risky." And she's not alone. A 2022 study in gastroenterology found adults over 75 have double the risk of serious complications from colonoscopy, such as bleeding, tears in the colon, or adverse reactions to anesthesia. And it's not just the procedure. The prep, the harsh laxatives required, can be dangerous on its own. Older adults are more likely to become dehydrated, experience electrolyte imbalances, faint, or develop irregular heartbeats, just from spending all night running to the bathroom. A viewer named John from Florida left a comment I won't forget. "I was prepping for a colonoscopy last year. On the second night, I slipped in the bathroom and fractured my pelvis, all for a test I didn't really need." So the big question is, who actually needs a colonoscopy after 75? It's not a simple yes or no, but it's also not complicated. You should consider continuing if you've had large polyps or colon cancer in the past, you have a family history of colorectal cancer, or you've never had any screening and you're in good shape living independently. But if have had 2 to 3 clean colonoscopies already, have no symptoms, have no family history, and you're 75, 78, or older, then you have every right to say no and feel no guilt about it. There are gentler ways to monitor colon health, like the FIT test, a stool-based home test for hidden blood, or a CT colonography, a virtual scan that doesn't require a scope. The key is having an honest conversation with your doctor. "I've had clean results before, I'm not having any symptoms now. Is another colonoscopy really necessary?" If they don't have a specific reason, you have every right to wait. No test is worth losing your safety, your independence, or your peace of mind just to be safe. Colonoscopy can be life-saving, but for some, it can also be the thing that turns a healthy person into a hospital patient overnight. So stay sharp, ask questions, and remember, good health isn't about doing the most tests, it's about doing the right tests at the right time. When you hear the words health screening, checkup, or early detection, what's your first reaction? Maybe you feel reassured. Maybe you think you're doing the right thing. But maybe, just maybe, you've also felt caught in a cycle of endless tests, results, follow-ups, prescriptions, and in the end, you don't feel any better, just more anxious. You're not alone. We've read hundreds of comments from people just like you, mothers, fathers, grandmothers, grandfathers, who've lived long enough to realize sometimes checking to feel safe is the very thing that steals your sense of safety. Mary, age 82, once wrote, "Every checkup makes me nervous. They take blood, run scans, measure everything, ask questions. Then they give me numbers and tell me to take more pills. But I still don't sleep well. I still don't feel good." Thomas, 70, left a comment that really made me stop and think. What I need isn't another test. What I need is a doctor to sit down, look me in the eye, and say, "Here's how to live so you don't need to rely on hospitals anymore." The problem isn't medicine. It isn't doctors. It's a system that's focused too much on finding things and not enough on understanding the person in front of them. And if you're 70, 75, 80, or older, you have the right to choose a different path. You don't have to go through another test if you have no symptoms, you have no concerning history, and, most importantly, you're doing well, independent, pain-free, and not living in fear. Because the real goal of healthcare after 70 isn't to detect every tiny change inside your body. It's to protect what still matters: your independence, your clarity, your joy, and your quality of time. You don't need to chase every number. You need a clear, gentle strategy that fits your life. Here are a few practical steps. Before any test, ask, do I have symptoms? What happens if this test shows something abnormal? What benefit will it really give me? Focus on habits that are easy to keep. Morning walks, leafy greens with each meal, more laughter, better sleep. Stay in regular contact with a doctor you trust, someone who sees you as a human being, not just a chart. And most of all, build your mental strength. Meditate, pray, garden, write a letter, play with your grandkids. These simple joys extend your life far more than any test ever could. Because in the end, what helps you live longer isn't the number of visits to the clinic. It's the number of days you truly feel alive, not ruled by fear of illness. I'm not saying you should never get a checkup. I'm saying be smart, be mindful, be in charge. You've come a long way. You've done your part. Now it's time to live these years the way you choose, with clarity, calm, and confidence. If this video spoke to you, share it with someone you love. You might help them avoid a medical decision they didn't really need. And if you have a story of your own, share it in the comments. We read them all, and we respond, like real friends would. Thank you for spending this time with us, and here's to your health, not just to survive, but to live fully and meaningfully. Now is the time to turn awareness into action. Not through big, overwhelming changes, but through small, wise choices that truly matter. I call this 7 days, 7 smart decisions. For the next 7 days, take one day at a time to reflect on a medical test you've been told is routine or necessary. No pressure to decide immediately. Just ask yourself, will this test actually help me live better or just make me worry more? What are the real benefits? What are the risks? Is there a gentler, safer alternative that still works? Write down your answers. Keep it simple. Be honest. This is for you, not for anyone else to judge. And you might be surprised how, in just 1 week, you start feeling more in control again. If you're worried about forgetting, print out a list titled 5 Medical Tests to Rethink After 70. Stick it on your fridge. So every time you open the door for an apple or a cold glass of water, you see a quiet reminder. I decide. I choose to live well, not live in fear. You don't have to fight the whole system. You just need to understand your body and what truly matters to you. That's enough. And now I'd love to hear from you. Which test will you start with? Leave your answer in the comments. We read every single one, and we'll respond, not as doctors or experts, but as friends who've walked this path and want to live it better together. We can't go back to 40, but we can take charge at 70. And sometimes all it takes is saying no at the right moment. There's a truth not many dare to say out loud. Medicine isn't always right. The tests, numbers, machines, they are just tools. But the person who decides how to use them is you. For years, we've been told to follow the doctor's orders, get all your checkups, don't make decisions on your own. But at a certain age, after 60, after 70, you begin to realize it's not about how many tests you take. It's about knowing what you're doing and why you're doing it. A clean test result can't replace a deep, restful sleep. A full body scan doesn't compare to 30 minutes walking outdoors, breathing slowly, hearing your own heartbeat calmly. No prescription can ease your worry like a hug from your grandchild. True health starts from within, from your habits, from your understanding. From the power to say no to what isn't necessary and yes to what truly matters. If today's message meant something to you, don't keep it to yourself. Share this video with an older friend, a loved one, your spouse. Because just one share might spare someone a needless pain, an unnecessary surgery, or a month in the hospital from a rushed decision. Remember, you don't need to know everything to make good choices. You just need to know enough not to be swept along. And if someone asks you, "You look better these days, what changed?" just smile and say, "I started being my own doctor."
At this age, we no longer have the luxury to live on autopilot. We don't have time to chase mindless advice, routine checkups done just because, or prescriptions that offer no real hope. We've come a long way, not to become patients, but to take charge of our own bodies. Have you realized this? Turning 70 is not the end. It's the doorway to a smarter, more intentional, freer life. No one should feel powerless just because of their age. No one should think, "I'm old now, there's nothing I can do." People over 70 are not fragile. They just need the right information at the right time, and they are stronger than we give them credit for. Maybe you've seen your mother's hand tremble holding a test result. Maybe you've heard your father sigh while swallowing his 7th pill of the day. Maybe you yourself have been pushed into a treatment plan you didn't fully understand. But today, we can change that. If this message resonates with you, please do 3 simple things. 1. Subscribe, so we don't lose each other in the noise of meaningless videos. 2. Leave a real comment, because your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. 3. Share this with someone you love. Maybe your parents, maybe your partner, maybe your future self 1 year from now. Because if just one insight, one honest fact can help someone avoid a mistake, then no action is ever too small. Live smart, not just long. You deserve a life that's not only extended, but full of clarity, control, and meaning. And if you're still here, I know this. You're part of a community that doesn't accept what's always been done. Welcome to a new way of living, awake, aware, and truly free.